change your epigenetics. Epigenetics is a study of how your lifestyle affects your gene expression. Every gene has 30,000 potential ways it can express itself, and how you live, how you think, how you breathe, how you eat, what you drink, all your interactive issues affect that quite a bit.
Today, we are speaking with Dr. Brad Montagne. He is the host of Your Health Reclaimed. Dr. Brad, could you please introduce yourself and let people know just a little bit more about you, please?
Okay. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. And I'm a veteran functional medicine doctor. I got on board right when that whole movement started, within a couple of years after that. So Lord's always been interesting with me, always given me the hardest things to deal with. I'm in the tail end of my fourth decade. We've specialized in restoring health to the worst debilitating cases of chronic illness known. We've shared patients with the most prestigious clinics in the world. We beat them every time in every case for 40 years in diagnostics, care, and resolution of every single case. So we deal with Lyme disease, candida, leaky gut, the root issue of almost all chronic illness. With that, we can deal with autoimmune issues, hormone dysregulation, gut issues, you name it, we deal with all of it.
Yeah, I've listened to several of your podcasts and great information. Thank you for providing that. It's good that people can connect with people like you to understand our health is important and what we're being fed is not necessarily true. What is the leading cause of chronic disease?
Okay, we'll all do that with a two-headed answer. They have strategically planned out to toxify our diet and our world. So that has created all kinds of gastrointestinal issues. Inside of the gut, we've got a lining. If you hold your fingers up in front of your face, your fingers represent the microvilli. Those projections off the gut wall increase the surface area of the gut 400 times, pretty close. And the microvilli, they secrete a mucus, and that mucus fills in the space between the microvilli, caps over the top. That's where all the microbes live and grow. The microbes do virtually all of our digestion. Whenever there's any inflammatory issue that goes on inside of the gut, those microvilli, they atrophy, and it's like you roll your hand into a fist and just look at your knuckles. It goes from the square footage with a microvilli is about the size of a tennis court. It's about 6 square feet when it's smooth. And it goes down to that. There's no place to hold the good microbes. The good microbes keep all the pathogens in check. The good ones wash down into the toilet, and the pathogens just grow wholesale unchecked. And that is the root. I do a lot of talks. That's the root of almost all chronic illness. So far, in close to 40 years, I don't think I've ever seen a case that's an exception to that, but I say almost just in case there is. Um, and that's really the root. Our toxic food supply, the use of pharmaceuticals, the high stress society, all that sets the stage.
So it's not really hypertension or obesity or even insulin deficiency, diabetes. What you're saying is our diet and the inside of our gut really dictates and mandates what we are outside externally. Is that what you mean by that?
That's exactly true. And the three things you just mentioned, the hypertension, the diabetes, and I missed the third one, all those are caused by gut dysfunction with the downstream responses that go on primarily through, we look at hypertension. I just did a podcast for a summit on hypertension. What causes that isn't what people think. It's not your heart. Your heart's a pump, and it's going to pump a quarter cup of blood every pump in an adult, close to that, as lazily as it can. It pumps it out into the arteries, and the artery walls, they got these muscle linings, a third layer. The inside of our gut and the inside of our arteries is only one cell layer thick. Super vulnerable. The inside of an artery is 7 times smoother than glass. Super slippery. And what happens inside of those arteries with the hypertension is inflammatory issues, primarily toxins, irritate the muscles so they quit expanding with every heartbeat, and it just goes out into a rigid pipe. And when you look at your cardiovascular disease, what happens is free radicals start to develop inside of the body. The gut is the biggest place for that to happen. Those free radicals get out into the system. When the gut atrophies, like we just talked about, and the flora becomes pathological, we can't process all of our toxicity. And the detox is something that everybody hears about. You got all these gurus who are trying to promote their favorite detoxing. It's all a bunch of hooey. They don't know what they're talking about. We have 4 detox organs in our body: the small intestinal wall, the colon wall, the microbes that grow in those microvilli. Those are 3 out of the 4, and the catch-all from all that is the liver. When the gut's leaking like a sieve, atrophied and full of pathogens, the liver can't catch it. It's supposed to stay. We've got over half our immune system in the gut simply because this is where everything happens. And all your toxins supposed to stay in this short loop from the gut to the liver dumps it back into the gut. It's supposed to stay in there till it's finished detoxing and it goes out. Detox happens in 2 phases. Phase 1 makes things more toxic, creates free radicals. Phase 2 makes those water soluble so you can excrete them. So when you look at cardiovascular disease, this whole plaquing issue, all these free radicals that are developed mostly inside of the gut from improper detox pathways, from poor gut health and all that, they cruise along through these artery walls and they start creating holes in this one cell layer thick. Once they start creating holes, other ones can follow and they go inside. Underneath the lining of the artery is called the submucosa. It's this cottony layer that has lymphatics, nerves, all these things, and allows all this expansion and contraction to go on. Well, when the free radicals go in there, they create this hyperinflammatory response, which creates what they call foam cells. Those are just immune cells that just blow up like a marshmallow that you burn in the fire and just blows up like that. And then the cholesterol goes in to create a Band-Aid. It's not the problem. It's absolutely not the problem. There's a guy who just did some research recently, I think this was within the last year, over in England, where he looked at the use of statins, things to decrease our cholesterol levels. He made this huge review article. Review article is somebody who's been in research for a long time and accepted as one of the gurus of that. He published this review article in one of the greatest peer-reviewed journals over there in Europe. As soon as that published, he got some threatening calls to pull his article. This a bunch of junk. It's whatever. And he goes, my research rock solid. So this guy caused them to have a review in the medical board and the research journal board. Double reviews. Just went through with a fine-tooth comb, and they came out with 100% affirmation. What this guy has is 100% science. There's not a hole in it. This is rock solid. And what that what that study proves is that if somebody's on statins to lower their cholesterol and they have not one hint of side effects, it will increase the lifespan for a maximum of 4 days. That's all. Cholesterol is just a band-aid. The statins, they pull the fat out of your brain, gives you dementia. It pulls the fat to build your hormones, screws that up. All our cell membranes are made up of 95% oils and fats, screws our membranes up. It screws up all of physiology, absolutely all of it. And this is something that most people don't realize is 40% of the best research articles in the best peer-reviewed journals in the world have what's called spin on them. The results are not supported by the study behind it. In America, suggested 70 to 75% of the articles are that way. It's money that drives it. And they proved with research that 75% of the time, there's what's called spin articles. It's overt fraud. It wasn't a mistake. So this is what fuels all that. And everybody thinks cholesterol is a problem. Cholesterol is a band-aid, and it's amazing how much this misinformation of these propaganda gurus and all that have made everybody believe all these lies so they don't never deal with the real thing. And it's
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Dr. Brad. We we are told so many things from doctors that are basically handed to them from these entities, that are making money. And a lot of people do not want to go deep into their health care because talking to doctors are hard, for one, and it costs a lot of money and a lot of time. So there's this mental block with doctors in the first place, and it causes a barrier. And when you go to a doctor, normally you get what, 10, 15 minutes, and then you're done. You're out of the office.
it's six. It's
Is it 6? Is that the medium? I'll be darned. That's incredible. So recently I shifted and changed my doctor because, you get bounced around, told this and that, and nobody wants to take the time to educate you. My current provider took over an hour twice, 2 appointments now with me. And I've never had that happen since I was a child. And that shows me there's difference in where you get your health care. What do you have to say about that?
I could say a lot, and it depends on how deep in the rabbit hole you want to go and which pill you want to take, the red or the blue one. I mean, but I was asked to do a section on a summit recently on healthcare education. And it was a mind blowing thing. Medical doctors and chiropractors have basically the same education. They're all clinical sciences are the same. Cardiology, gastroenterology, all that stuff is the same. The homeopathics and naturopathic schools don't have one clinical science in them. That was a shock. The other thing that's an amazing thing, Rockefeller and Carnegie invested pretty heavily in the pharmaceutical industry, Merck and Pfizer, way back in the early 1900s. They set the stage for medical education. There is not one school that produces a quote doctor that deals with health issues of any profession that teaches chronic illness. And they know there's a study came out in JAMA, Journal American Medical Association, back in around '06, where they openly admitted that medical education had changed in over 110 years. And they are graduating their doctors with absolutely no understanding of 75% of the cases that are going to come into their office which is chronic illness. So that's the big thing. You touched on another thing a lot of people don't know. You know what the one word definition of doctor is? Old world, what is it? It's Noah Webster's first dictionary. Any idea what it is?
I, I do, but I'm going to let you expose this to our listeners.
It's teacher. I take that personal. You found a doctor that does. Doctors don't get paid for their time anymore with that insurance. So you found a rare breed. The reality, they get paid for a diagnosis, and that's it. And you touched on something that I learned way back in 1989. I got into Eastern Europe and Russia as the Berlin Wall was coming down. We left here on day one, landed in Frankfurt on day two, went through Checkpoint Charlie day three into Eastern Europe and Russia. The biggest lesson I learned over there back in 89 was a mind blower. That America had the biggest, most well oiled propaganda machine in the world. And I'm in one of the biggest communistic empires that's just, it never fell. Okay, the communist line, it never came down. It's just a ploy to just seduce the West so that everything's okay. But I'm in what we believe to be the biggest propaganda machine in the world. And I'm over there and I learned it's not there, it's here. And it's so much worse now. it's just so much worse now.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, that blows me away. It's interesting that you know I follow a lot of these medical things, and I found out by following this that over in Saudi Arabia, they have one of the most dedicated, sophisticated healthcare systems in the world. And I'm seeing them put so much time and energy into the diagnostic portion of medicine. Isn't that really where we should be focusing on diagnostics instead of band aid medication?
Okay, you touched my identity. So let me expound on that a little bit. Um, I'll preface that with this: the the number one functional medicine doc in the world. It was recently let out in a podcast that their extensive evaluation consists of 100 different tests, and you can do add-ons on top of that if necessary. That's the most well-known, famous functional medicine doc in the world. We're 4.5 times that. I got a good friend who's a number one functional medicine doc, different part of the country. His metabolic tests are 52. I'm 5 times that. And the reason why, yeah, the reason why is this. I've been, since I was born, I got this curious mind of why. How's that work? What's going on with that? And because of that, I've studied physiology and how things work inside of us for 40 years. Whenever I run into something that's not making sense, I'm back in my physiology book. I'm doing searches trying to find stuff because you have to understand what's going on to be able to do that. When we look at our present diagnostic system, that was set up by primarily Rockefeller. They put they did a few things. They sent off the Faulkner brothers to go analyze all the medical schools in North America. So throughout the United States, America, and Canada, there are 177 schools when they took off. Why they took off, Rockefeller set up the University of Chicago and Rockefeller University to be a model for the new medicine that they were going to do, with medicine education with a basis of science and an emphasis on research. And what they started to do is model what they wanted in these universities. So they're producing graduates with their agenda and their idea. The medical education used to be apprenticeship up until this time. The Faulkner brothers were let out in 1905. They came back in 1910 with the Faulkner Report, scathing rebuke of all the educational systems, saying that half of them should close. They should change everything to the format that Rockefeller set up in these two universities. So shortly after that, I think they got a guy by the name of Welsh. I believe that was his last name. He started Johns Hopkins University with what the Rockefellers had set up. Within 5 years, there were only 77 medical schools left, and they all had the identical curriculum set up in Johns Hopkins University. So there's your basis from that. When we look at diagnostics, it comes back to two different people in history. Louis Pasteur was obsessed with germs, and he figured germ A raised disease A, germ B, disease B. And if you figure out what germ it was, you kill the germ and you'll be fine. Everybody thinks that. I talk to people all the time with Lyme disease, think if they can just kill the Borrelia, they're fine. And that'll keep them from getting healthy, because that's not what the issue is. The Borrelia is growed there because of something led it. And it always comes, it's like a gang, a bad gang, like a Hell's Angel biker gang, though that kind of level, a bad as far as microbes go. It all comes in this great big huge group that just wipes everything out. Borrelia is not the issue. It's what allowed it to grow is what really gives you the issue to heal. So what they did in Rockefeller University of Chicago is they set up lab tests. And the purpose of lab tests was to increase the use of pharmaceuticals so they could make more profit. So lab tests are there to get a diagnosis, which is an insurance code, and its whole purpose is to push some type of something, which in this case was pharmaceuticals, as a, quote, treatment to relieve the symptoms, not deal with the root issue. They quit teaching people how to find the root issues because medical doctors were more natural before this period of time. So they've promoted through all the school and education this cult issue of it's got to be scientific. But people don't realize when you approach a conversation like we're having with a bias, you don't have an open dialogue. If you approach something like science with a bias to prove something, it's manipulation of falsified information as if it's fact to twist and direct the course of society. So that's what the lab tests do. The accuracy of those, you take the best Lyme lab in the world about a decade ago, they had on their website, their tests were 0 to 20% accurate if you got the lab sample within the first 1 to 2 weeks of infection. Now that lab, still considered the best Lyme lab in the world, they just say their tests are not a diagnosis. A while back, they did a study, 172 people. They did triple blood draws, sent those blood samples, marked them really carefully in code, and sent them to the best Lyme labs in the world. Sometimes one lab got 3 samples, sometimes 3 different labs got 1. Got 516 lab samples by the end of that study. When they got all the tests back, no 2 results were the same. No 2. We look at the lab tests for food intolerance, 2 to 3% accurate. They have no idea what causes the responses. So that's it. You look at the studies on candida testing, they for like cancer, 170 some odd patients, no clinical relevance of whatever the lab said. No clinical relevance to help direct care, resolve anything like that. So though we're seduced into believing this is the way to do stuff, it only is part of the information, and it will never give us what we want. It won't give us our health. It'll give us a prescription. They seduced the alternative healthcares into using their same system. Their effectiveness has fallen through the floor as far as what that goes. And it doesn't matter whether you get drug A, herb A, pill A, tincture A, doesn't matter. The results are the same. only 20 to 25% of those people with that system you'll be able to help at all. And that's only reduce symptoms, that's not get them well. And the New England Journal of Medicine put out an article on that. I think it was in 2008. Time Magazine got a hold of that, and they did a cover article called Medical Guesswork. And they exposed that to everybody. But no one's changed anything in close to 20 years. So, that's one type of diagnostic. Another type is dark field microscopy or live cell analysis. I was at a Lyme forum a while back, and the top Lyme researcher, I believe, in the world, Tom Greer, was there directing that. And I asked a question about the dark field, and he says, well, the problem with dark fields is you can't identify species. You can see a shape going through there, but the only way you can identify species is to kill it and use species-specific stains. It's like, okay, that whole discussion's over for me because I don't need to go anywhere with it. I know what he said. He's had pathologist in a research hospital, biology degree, and there's nothing to argue with that. It's like, okay, I know a lot of people use it, but they see shapes and they're guessing at what's there. Guesses don't get people healthy. It sells a lot of money, a lot of product, but it doesn't get people healthy. So that's another kind of diagnostics. The third kind of diagnostics, electrodiagnostics, that's set up. You look at the research behind that. It gives a reasonable indication of what's going on, but it can't tell the extent or the cause. And since it can't tell the extent or the cause, its application of therapeutic intervention is atrocious. It's not worth using. We've had a lot of people with it come in with their backpack full of supplements, and almost nobody has any of them that work. And the few people that have something work, it's like one or two out of a box full. So, and the last form of diagnostics is muscle testing. It works off of quantum physics. When we look at our education, is just full of lies. And when we look at the model of an atom that we're given in school, it looks like this solar system of orbitals going around. We're told there are electrons and all that. Well, that's not how elements bond and all that. And they make these pie-shaped orbitals that skip through the nucleus and show up on the other side. And what ends up the building blocks of all the parts of an atom called a quark. It's electromagnetic spin of light. And if that was from a natural source, if you put any matter in absolute darkness, it ceases to exist. Because where's the light come from? Where's that electromagnetic spin of light? It's one of the most rock solid scientific proofs there is a God. God is light, and he just lent part of his nature to make these things. But what an atom ends up being is these orbitals move around. They can be positive or negative, depends on your isotope. But they're electromagnetic pumps. You're just going back and forth with these electromagnetic pumps. And that's what muscle testing does. It tests the integrity of those electromagnetic pumps. And if you can find somebody that really knows what they're doing, I'm kind of on the upper echelons of that because I don't trust myself, and since I'm skeptic myself, there's a passage that says, out of the mouth of two or three witnesses, a thing is established. That's like a courtroom thing. And most people don't realize that the Bible was written as a courtroom testimony to prove something. I'm not satisfied with two or three. I like four or five. So I do all these cross-checking with everything that I do, with all that, and the accuracy that we find is remarkable. We had somebody who'd been to some of the most prestigious Lyme clinics in the world, 50,000 a week. Live on the other side of the world. They found me, looked at some of my stuff, and they've studied every Lyme guru they can find, read every Lyme book, and this guy says, you're light years ahead of anybody else. No one talks about what you talk about. We did an evaluation with them halfway around the world that was more accurate than anything they spent 50 grand a week for. And we got them free of all that stuff in a real reasonable time, like close to 6 months. So those are your different approaches as far as diagnostic goes. I'm wholeheartedly in the same camp. We need a ton more diagnostics, and when we got things that really aren't working right, we can go through so many different layers. There's no end to what you can test. Absolutely no end. And sometimes you have really difficult people where you have to go to that minutia to do that.
I'm kind of curious, Dr. Brad, what is your thought on? I've interviewed a few people that they create the modeling for the medical imaging screening, and they detect different things with this. So they're using artificial intelligence to look at different things and come up with overall, this is what it is. What's your thought on reliance on AI for this type of scanning, if you will?
Okay, I'll give you my own experience as an answer. Working with some people to help me with my podcast. They use AI to give me like outlines to do stuff. I can't use them because what they pull off of AI is the same cut and paste BS that has no clinical relevance whatsoever to what's going on inside of somebody. And I've got I can use their main points, but as far as what they fill in with all their support and all that, it's junk. It's absolute total junk. And I wouldn't know that if I wasn't a physiology nut and I didn't have close to 40 years of testing, cross testing, and everybody we work with it's like a clinical trial. There's no protocols with what I do. We test what's going on and we test what we need to use to restore health in that person, what the root issues are, how we can restore health in that person. And we can prove we can restore that health before they get off the table in day one of our evaluation. And that takes 2.5 hours to do something like that. So using AI, it's a bunch of falsified, cut and paste information that comes off of all these spin articles and everything else that's out there that's not true, has no relevance, with a 20 to 25% effect of helping, not resolving what the problem is, of helping. We're over 4 times that in complete restoration of health. They're way above 90% of people that have been to the best clinics in the world. Were way over 90%. And, it's a totally different system than what we use. But without my knowledge of the function that's going on, the muscle testing is just it only becomes a manipulative tool because it's not based on something and you don't even know what to test. I use it systematically because the systematic way that I use it gives me all the interactions of physiology that's going on. And I cross check all this stuff all the time. So for me, it's a whole different story. But what I've found, one of my opening lectures in grad school, doctor school, was 50% of what you're going to learn in this school is false information. I could have heard a pin drop. And I'm thinking, what am I doing here? And she was an honest teacher. And what she said was, we're going to teach you the current body of science as we know it today. Research is going to prove that 50% of what we believe is true today is not. It's up to you to keep up with the research to find out which half is and which half isn't. I've stayed up with that because I've got this curious mind and I'm always digging in the literature, trying to find out the keys of things that just don't make sense. When you deal with what I deal with, nothing fits the standard model. it's fallen through the cracks because no one could figure it out. You know, we keep seeing people that have exhausted their resources as specialists of every kind of profession there is, and no one's been able to help them. And you can't just go, be satisfied with this la di da type of an approach with that. You got to be somebody who just loves to dig, and a curious mind. How does this work? What's going on with this? How is this even happening? What's involved with all this? What's all the cross interactions with all that? That's why I got led to write the book that I got out there. It's called Exposing Lyme and Chronic Illness. I believe there's 7 chapters in physiology in that, and I've had people who've read that have been through all the literature. It's a mind blower. There's things in there that no one else talks about.
I'm sorry, Dr. Brad. What does that book actually cover? If you will go deeper into some of the content there.
Okay, it started off as a different title, Breaking the Chronic Nightmare of Lyme Disease. It's about Lyme disease, but there's so much interaction with Lyme disease. You got to look at the predisposing factors. So it deals with the predisposing factors. Candida and leaky gut's its own chapter. I've got chapters on how the gut works, immune system works, um, your hormonal system, how that affects intimacy. We've got all of this interaction going on, and I explain how physiology is supposed to work in a normal sense and how it breaks down in chronic illness. So it covers every aspect of chronic illness that's out there. I should add a couple things. It doesn't cover mold. We deal with mold a lot. Um, and I don't specifically cover cancer, but it lays a foundation of understanding what cancer is. And it wouldn't take much to add to it. And those are about the only 2 things that I think could be added that would make the book better than what it is. But a ton on food intolerances, ton.
I think that's a big one right there, food, because as we started off with, is what we consume is what we are. So that that diet, a lot of people they want to go to a dietitian, but I found even the meal preps that dietitians sometimes come up with is based on diets from the status quo, if you will. You're still eating the uh, chemicals in the food. All of these processed foods are being suggested for a diet. And I personally have found out over the last 12 years that what you put in will affect every bit of you. So I've changed my whole diet, trying to eat fresh, live food as much as possible. I don't eat much processed food at all anymore. We bake our own bread. We eat fish. We try to moderate. That's the big one for us because I loved to eat. It tasted good. It felt like an addiction. So controlling all of that really matters. What's your best suggestion for shifting out of that mindset into a more healthy mindset?
Okay, let me address the dietitian industry and then I'll get into that, okay? Most people don't realize the hospitals in the United States of America are the most unhealthy place to eat in the entire continent. The okay, they're all staffed by dietitians. The dietitian issue is only to promote the acceptable norm. Most people don't realize their continuing ed is primarily sponsored by Pepsi Cola. And if you get off of the agenda that they want, you're going to lose your license. So There's why your experience of what you're talking about. When we look at the blue zones, they're the best model that we have of a dietary lifestyle to give us long life. They commonly lived 120 plus. They're still working in their 90s. Their sexual interaction in their 90s is what 30-year-olds are over here, 2, 3 times a week. So that's a pretty good model to look at. Their lifespan is at least 50% more than what we expect over here. It's almost double, but it's at least 50% more. And all these things that people accept over here of going away, like you look at the sexual attraction, that happens from like about infancy all the way to the grave. It never quits. I was told years ago that one of the biggest pools of STD per generation was in nursing homes. And I thought that they were lying to me till I looked it up, and that's true. That's been true. So, that just supports the reality of how big of a thing this is. And it's a huge measuring rod of health, just huge. So when we look at the blue zones, there's a few things that are really key with that. Bowel habits, nobody likes to talk about it. You can find any doctor that knows what they're doing. They understand what I'm about to say because it's a mind blower. It is your bowel health that determines the health of the rest of your body. It's the fulcrum on which everything hinges. So if you can't write the bowel health and all that, you're never going to get anywhere. And the people think they can cheat with that. I'll tell them, you can go ahead and cheat, but it's going to take you twice as long as it costs you twice as much money to get there. It's personal choice. If you want to waste,
What do you mean by cheat with that?
there are certain things that you have to do therapeutically to make your gut health really right. And people don't want to do those things. So, they say they do, but they don't. And the colon just doesn't heal up and all that. So the first goal of a diet is to normalize bowel movements. 3 to 5 is normal in every tribal society, every culture that has no existence of gastrointestinal disease. So that's how we figure out what normal is. 3 to 5 per day. Yeah, mind blower, right? Of every culture in the blue zones and have longevity and health in their elderly years. 50% of the plate's vegetables. Not a surprise. Oh, those are two really key issues. And you said that you make your own bread. We make our own flour to make our own bread. and I have for um, there's 2 grain grinders to get. The used to be Magic Mill, then Bosch bought them out, then Magic Mill got it back. Now K-Tech has it. It's a rectangular one. It's the most durable. You want a hammer mill. It's the most durable one, but it makes the most noise. It's a little bit dirty. But we had one with 6 to 8 people in the house for 20 years, and that lasted 20 years. So that's pretty durable. K-Tech makes that one now. So that's probably the most.
So what flour, what grain do you mill the flour with?
Okay, that's what I'm going to get at. The next one is the Nutrimil. It's round and they're real fragile and they look like they're going to rip apart. And I have seen some that do, but ours is 7 or 8 years old and it still looks cherry. So those are the 2 mills you want to get: either the K-Tech that's going to really last forever, or the I believe it's Nutrimil. It's a round one. So when you look at flours, I used to use 4 grains. If you do any 4 grains, you balance your protein. And I started off with 3. That was oats, organic oats, because if you don't have organic and they don't blow the hoppers out where they harvest the wheat dust still in it, and that cross contaminates. And that's why you hear about gluten-free oats. It's because they actually clean their combines after they harvest their wheat. So oats, early crop, wheat's a late crop. So it's always in the fall that you got to clean that out. Doesn't matter if the oat won't contaminate the wheat, but the wheat will contaminate the oat. So it used to be organic oat, rice, and sorghum. We've had a really hard time finding clean sorghum for a couple of years. The use of herbicides and pesticides is insane in our country, and we've got this drift that goes from one farm to another. It was amazing a few years back. The Monsanto was bought out by Bayer a while back, and they had this issue of doing these huge lawsuits against these small farmers against things. Well, some farmers got smart a while ago, a few years back, and they said, let's gang together and let's go after them. Let's sue them for contaminating our crop. And Monsanto lost, and it was a huge, huge, huge thing. So we quit using sorghum a while ago. My wife got some buckwheat seed years ago to do as a ground cover, and it didn't do very good. So I put that in flour, and I found something absolutely amazing. We don't use wheat, and the reason why we don't use wheat, 95% of the hard wheat crop in North America is sprayed with Roundup 2 days to 3 weeks before it's harvested. It's super, super, super toxic. Even the cleanest organic wheat is not clean. Even the einkorn wheat is not clean. There's too much cross genetics and all that it takes a minimum of 6 months after you heal your gut to calm down from one of the major food intolerances to be able to reintroduce that. And the look-alike from what supposedly these good options aren't good enough to do that. So I don't use wheat, and I haven't for a lot of years. So my wife, she had this buckwheat seed, and it didn't make a good ground cover crop. So I decided I'd put it in the flour, and I found something that blew me away. It works as a binder. Everybody's putting binders in their gluten-free stuff. The buckwheat is a full. It's a complete protein, and it softens and it goos everything up. So you don't need a binder, which is absolutely beautiful, and it makes flour absolutely wonderful. Then where we're living now was at an Oriental food store, grocery store, and I saw the sweet rice, and I go, wow, I wonder what that is. Wonder what that'd be like. And I just got this sense to pick some up. I started using sweet rice in the flour instead of the long grain hard. You always want to get whole grain, whatever you're going to get, and I'll explain why in a moment. But it softens and it glues stuff together too. So you don't need binders in this. So now our flour is organic oats, sweet rice, buckwheat, and to replace the sorghum, we started using teff. Teff's another. It's buckwheat and teff aren't true grains, but they're close. And teff is what Africa runs off of. It's their main staple to make their breads and all that. We started adding that. It's almost a chocolate color, so it turns your breads and all that more of a light brown, like a German chocolate almost. But the teff really puts stuff together, and we use that same mix, equal parts. We use that same mix to make tortillas, to make flatbreads. I perfected sourdough risen loaf bread, gluten-free loaf bread, just as an experiment. And there's some key things with that. And I wrote a book on cooking gluten-free that's got how to make your own sourdough and all that. You can make a sourdough so fast, way faster than anybody else. If you get a quart jar, put maybe like 3/4 of an inch of flour in there, add enough water in that to make it like a super thick pancake batter. And my wife got this idea of put coffee filters over the top to keep the bugs out and lets it breathe. Stick a rubber band around where the top line of where that is in your bottle. As soon as that seems to rise, add another 3/4 inch, enough water, and stir that. And it might take 2-3 days for the first bump and maybe 2 days for the second, but pretty soon, by the time you get to the top of the bottle, you haven't had that daily. By the time you get that to the top of the bottle, you got a full strength sourdough you can do anything with at all. And we never pour off anything. I just make flatbreads um, just to use whatever the discard would be. What most people did. It makes no sense to take something that's so healthy and throw it away. So when you look at a grain, it's got four different parts to it. The shuck's that outside where the feathers on it, and that's to catch the wind to drift it far from the plant so it scatters in a normal sense. Inside of that's the alluron layer. That's what seals the grain off from oxygen and all that and keeps everything protected. Inside of the alluron layer, you got a germ. That's the embryo of the plant, and that's where all the nutrients are. That's where all your oils are, your enzymes are, your proteins are, and the rest is all starch called endosperm. When you get in whole grain, you get in the alluron layer, that's your fiber. You're getting the germ, which the reason if you buy your whole grain flour at a store, they've always taken the germ out because the oils start to go rancid within 3 hours of room temperature. So you look at buckwheat, like buckwheat pancakes, a little black dots in there. That's all the oxidized oil. It's gone rancid. And that's why it's bitter. Buckwheat's actually sweet, but all them black dots, that's rancid oils going on in there. So you make your own, and we store all our flour in the freezer. I typically make 3 gallons at a time, get some silicone Ziploc bags, and you've got to use a brush and clean those little grooves out to be able to use those quite a bit. But we've always got, every time I make 3 gallons, they all go in the freezer and pull it out and do whatever I'm going to do with it. So, that's the grain. That's how we do stuff. The trick with sourdough risen loaf bread is you mix that, you don't punch it down. Okay, you can mix it all up in like a great big glass or stainless bowl, and you can cover that with a towel. And it's best to do this at night because it takes forever to get all that to rise. You do it at night before you go to bed, and when you wake up in the morning, it started to rise. You got to take a spatula and just peel it off of that so you can roll it into a bread pan. And one of the best things, you can use parchment paper and put that in the bread pan. And you just want to gently roll it into that. You can wiggle it a little bit like this to get everything to settle in there. And because if you punch it down, it's not going to rise again. So you you let it do that, and it doesn't get stuck in all the folds and make the mess and all that. And it's good to take a knife, wet it, and do just a light slit lengthwise down the bread because it's going to split. You don't have the glutens to keep it from splitting, and those are really the tricks. You want that really gelatinous when you mix it up, and it'll dry out some as it's rising, but you don't want to scoop it. You want to use that spatula and peel it off so you can gently roll it in. And you got to be really, really, really careful with that. It's like one of those things you protect like a baby.
Yeah, that's right. It does affect the texture of your bread for sure. Uh, Another thing with the pour outs, I like to make waffles, and you can freeze those and then pop them in the toaster and have a quick waffle for a snack. So never waste any of that. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. The are you doing yours with wheat or are you doing that with other grains?
I am. Uh,
Yeah, switch. Yeah, Prairie Gold is the Prairie Gold's the cleanest organic wheat you can find in the country, and it's not clean enough for people that have had health problems to come back to it. It's just not.
I find that pretty interesting. Yeah, yeah, it's the genetic modifications of things have really went overboard.
That's not it. That's a wagging the dog thing. You know what the real issue with GMO is?
No, tell me.
The real issue with GMO is the herbicides and pesticides they have to use to keep it living. Yeah, yeah, everybody wants to focus on GMO. Atrazine's 10 times worse than Roundup. You can't find a corn product that's not full of atrazine. You cannot. Corn is the most, I call it an evil food. Everything that corn is a part of and touches is too toxic to consume. It's in your tires, your spark plugs, your brake shoes. What?
Really, even if you grow it yourself?
Yep, you can't find. I test everybody on. My wife asked, can we reduce some of this stuff? But I got like 7 different strains of corn, and one of them's super clean organic corn. Man, it's too close.
I'll be darned. So, what's the best way to get people to think a little more about what they're eating? Because I really think it's about being slothful and laziness of taking care of ourselves that's happening.
The humans are lazy. There's no doubt about it, and the ones that aren't, they're the ones that are productive. So it's a really big issue, and this is why healthcare is so bad. Doctors are lazy too. What I do takes so much extra work. It's exhausting. We years ago, uh, continuing ed group we were part of, they had close to 100 docs start a thread on Lyme disease. My wife kept trying to get me to be a part of that, and I kept saying, "I don't got time. I don't got time." And finally, after close to half a year, I said, "Okay, I'll sit down." And I responded to these people. They're saying stupid stuff like stevia is going to kill it. How's a toxic sugar full of erythritol going to do anything good for you? It's like you guys don't even know what you're talking about. So I posted this post on that, and I said, okay, this is who I am. Here's a couple published articles to prove that I know what I'm talking about. Lyme disease is a big part of what I do. It takes a philosophical change. There are tools you can give. There are understandings of physiology you can give, and you can teach people systematic ways to test this to find out what it is, because the magic bullets in the history of what was the predisposing factors to get anybody interested. Like 100 docs in that, not one raised their hand. They all wanted what the magic bullet was, and I told them what the magic bullet was, but it's too much work, so they don't not interested. So that is,
Uh, I find that very, very alarming. And this is amongst doctors.
mhm. Yeah, we're people. I mean, if I got a day of testing, it's exhausting. It's a mental drain, it's a physical drain, it's a spiritual drain, because you are literally trying to like climb inside somebody to figure out what's going on with all these dynamics. And it's just, it sucks you dry. You gotta have ways to regenerate and protect yourself and all that, and it's too much for people, and they don't know how to charge to make that worthwhile. Because insurance, they're not going to pay for anybody's health, so it's all going to have to be cash, and people just don't know how to do that. I'm in a stage in my life where I can do whatever I want, and I don't need much. I haven't owed anybody anything for lots and lots and lots of years, so I don't need much, and I can do things that are completely reasonable and completely practical, and nobody looking over my shoulder. They can't tell me what I can do and what I can't. So I'm outside of the system. You have to be to do what I do.
That's a good thing to understand, that there are providers out there outside the system, because they're not lazy. And I do commend you for that. Thank you for providing for people. Uh, our time is coming to an end, Dr. Brad. Is there anything that you want to add to our conversation today?
Um, we covered a whole bunch of. These aren't surface issues. They're really a lot of root issues, and we skirted around a lot. I've got a on my website. I've got a book on how to change your epigenetics. Epigenetics is a study of how your lifestyle affects your gene expression. Every gene has 30,000 potential ways it can express itself, and how you live, how you think, how you breathe, how you eat, what you drink, all your interactive issues affect that quite a bit. And I've got this book called Healing Lifestyle on a page called hello.healthfullyu, HEALTHFULLY, the letter U.com. I'm going to plug your email in there. You get that ebook. It's some really simple but profound things you can do to change your epigenetics. It doesn't change your genes, it changes the way they express themselves. And that's something that a lot of people don't know. That book is powerful for changing lives. It's called Healing Lifestyle at hello.healthfullyu.com. That's really huge. Plug into our podcast. That's Your Health Reclaimed. If you pick that book up on that website, on that one link, hello.healthfullyu.com, you got clickable links to take you to my book, Exposing Lyme and Chronic Illness. Another click on it goes to my website. Another one goes to my podcast. It gives you access to all kinds of stuff. And I've got a lot of videos on there. I've got a lot of content. And as you can tell, this has not been a planned or canned conversation. Everything that's coming out of my mind is just from the way that I process and all these years of studying, just being in the thick of things. So that's me.
Yeah, well, it shows, Dr. Brad. Your knowledge is just deeper than a well, and it's a cornucopia basket. So I've enjoyed having you here, and I'm actually going to ask you back because there's so much that we haven't touched on. I think it's worth the value to try to drag you back in and have another conversation. Uh, could you could you tell people how to reach out and get involved with you?
That book, as I said, that gives them all my links. And something that I talked to a guy over in the Philippines today. I talked to another podcaster a week or two ago, and another one. I got this idea of doing live Q&As, and I'm setting the stage where I can do that, where you can ask anything. My wife knows me really well, and people ask, "Is there anything you want to talk about?" And she used to hesitate for a moment. He goes, and then she just shake her head. There is nothing he won't talk about.
Yeah, my wife does the same with me. Do you ever shut up?
Well, it's not so much that, but we've got all these embarrassing things. You take bowel habits, and I said that's a fulcrum of healing. I had somebody just send a picture to me. They deal with women's issues, and one of my things in my form with that is what's the three topmost issues in your niche that people want to be addressed. How's that being addressed, and how's that affecting everybody? And women's cycles and menopause are big things. Those, I talk about those things all the time. All the time. You have to talk about these uncomfortable situations. I mean, I talk so much about that. I had a woman come in. I was dealing with one of her daughters who been at Mayo for her whole life. She's just a walking strawberry rash everywhere. They couldn't do anything. And we started working with her. Her older sister came in, and their mom brought her in one day, and she comes in the room with her and says, "You need to talk to her about birth control." And mom splits. And you think, wow, that's not the kind of conversation that you expect a parent to drop off at a natural doc's office. But she understood. I knew how to talk about that, and I can talk in people's language without being embarrassing. Yeah, I find it amazing talking about women's cycles. Women have no idea how they function. They don't know what's going on with them, and I've been teaching women on those things for forever. You look at all of these things that go on. Most of us don't know why, and almost nobody ever gives an answer. You finally found a prize of a doc who will talk to you and give you an answer from what he knows.
Yeah. And the golden nugget is I've with the release of just the stress of knowing, oh, somebody's willing to sit down and speak to me, that changed everything. And my attitude about speaking with my doctor has changed. And I think that's very valuable, that people should be able to communicate without feeling rushed with their doctor. We're missing a lot. So, Dr. Brad, I say thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks for the invite. This was really a special talk.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us today. If you found this podcast enlightening, entertaining, educational in any way, please share, like, subscribe, and join us right back here next week for another great episode of the Dead America Podcast. I'm Ed Waters, your host. Enjoy your afternoon, wherever you might be.